Welcome to another episode of Exploring Brain and Mind. I wasn't sure how I should call the episode. Should I call it Brain and Mind? Should I call it Brain versus Mind? Because there's a long, centuries-old discussion about, is the brain the mind? Is the mind the brain? How are they connected? Are they connected? Are they separate? Well, let's have a little explore in this episode about it, shall we? About some basics. Keep on listening. Let's start off the episode with a simple definition of what's the brain and what's the mind. So the brain is the physical organ that consists of neurons, glial cells, I never know about this pronunciation, and blood vessels. It controls bodily functions, processes sensory input information, and it stores memories. I know it does a lot more, like to do with motor functions, controlling motor functions and all that as well. And some people might like to compare the brain like the hardware of a computer. It might seem a little bit far-fetched because the brain is organic and a computer is a man-made thing. But still, there are similarities. The mind, on the other hand, is like the subjective experience generated by brain activity, like an abstract entity that is responsible for consciousness, for thoughts, for beliefs, for emotions, and for imaginations. Things we cannot touch, we cannot see, and it's like people compare it to the software of a computer, like a program that runs the computer. Again, it's debatable, but it's not that bad an analogy. So the key difference between the brain and the mind is that the brain is the organic, the physical that can be touched and looked at with modern technology like MRI scanners. It can be studied that way by being looked at and investigated with these new modern devices, while the mind is more intangible and it's existing as the result of brain activity, and that's more and more coming out by more research that is undertaken constantly to find how brain affects mind or mind affects brain, and it disproves any of the discussions that might still be ongoing in the field of philosophy or spirituality. In philosophy, there used to be the French philosopher René Descartes from the 17th century. He was distinguishing the brain as something separate from the mind. He said the brain is the biology and the mind is where the consciousness and the self-awareness come from. So he kind of did not connect the both together and how they could be linked, but it was obviously difficult because there were no MRI scanners at the time. There was not that much in-depth science and neuroscience at the time. So no wonder he, and some others I'm sure as well, came up with this idea of brain and mind being separate. In the spiritual realm, it is brain and the mind is put into the same thing with the soul, but people say the soul is different from the mind, and it's brain, mind, and soul are three different things. That's another completely different discussion. And maybe I'll find someone for a chat at some point for one of the later episodes when I have guests on the podcast to dive a bit more into that, into the brain, mind, and soul topic. How do brain and mind work together? The brain shapes the mind. Neural processes create thoughts, emotions, and decisions, like the prefrontal cortex, for example. helps with reasoning and with impulse control. And as an example, we can look at something that I've mentioned before in other episodes, like when we're learning a new skill, neural pathways and structures are formed and refined by doing them again and again and again through repetition. Because otherwise, the brain would jump back to old habits, old pathways, any kind of hardwired things, if there are such. But the mind influences the brain as well. Thoughts and emotion can physically change the brain through neuroplasticity. Positive thinking or mindfulness can strengthen beneficial neural connections, and they can have a huge impact as well on production of different neurotransmitters. The ones that enhance the function of the brain or the ones that inhibit the function of the brain. Now let's have a look at a few key concepts to do with brain and mind. So let's start with the conscious versus the subconscious. The conscious mind processes intentional thoughts, while the subconscious governs automatic responses and habits, like our autopilot. It does things without us thinking about it, without us noticing much. We might notice due to awareness, but it's really the automatic responses. A great example for this is always learning to drive or driving a car, i.e. from not even being aware that you can't drive or want to drive to finally being able to drive without even thinking about it. You just do it automatically. If you think about it as well, how many automatic things we do every day. We talk, like I'm talking now. We walk. We know how to make a cup of coffee. We know how to use a phone. All these things are automatically programmed into our subconscious mind. We don't need to think about how we do it. Yes, if we get a new phone and the smartphone's technology evolves rather quickly, if the new phone has a lot of new features and new gimmicks, then it might take a little bit of time, a day or two or three, until we get used to using the new phone. And think about all the automatic processes, the physical processes within the body, how we breathe automatically, how the heart beats automatically, digestion, needing to go to the toilet. All these things are all happening in the subconscious, and we don't need to remember anymore how to do those. So the subconscious mind filters perceptions, influences behaviors and images, routines, and it basically operates beyond our awareness. Then there's emotion and memory. The limbic system links the brain and mind by attaching emotions to experiences. This is why experiences that stirred our emotions or involved our emotions a lot will be easier and more significant to remember. And here I can tie in the conscious subconscious again nicely, because sensory input creates the experiences which we interpret and store as memories into our mind. So that's a conscious process. And then the experiences are stored into our subconscious. And the more significant these events or experiences were and the more emotions they're involved, the more and the better we will remember those. Saying that, scientists don't still fully understand how consciousness arises from brain activity. So there is continuous research going on. And every now and then there's articles coming out that seem to get a new finding. There's a lot going on in research about the brain and the mind. Next, let's look at belief systems that can have a huge impact on brain function and brain processes. If we think about, let's say, for example, in school times when we had teachers that consistently told us that something wasn't right and it's not good enough what we're doing, we need to work harder. And if this happens repeatedly as a conscious process of taking that in, it gets into the subconscious, and the mind then forms the belief of we're not good enough, we need to work hard, we need to work harder, we can't do things, we don't understand things, which might impact on how we look at things, how we attack new tasks, new habits. That might mean we start new habits but then drop out really quickly because the belief of not being good enough or not being able to do it hinders us from actually achieving what we are trying to achieve. And it shows again how repetitive experiences from consciousness are getting deployed into the subconscious, which then forms the beliefs and hinders us. So conscious, subconscious is kind of always involved somehow in the brain and mind, thoughts and explorations, because they're both just affecting each other all the time. Back to the belief systems. I'm sure you heard of the placebo effects, that when you believe something, that it can trigger physical processes. Let's see, in some like clinical trials, what they often do is they've got a big group of people and they split it into two, and one half of the group is getting the new drug or new pill or whatever it is to test, and the second group might get just a little similar looking but a sugar, like maybe a sugary pill or something like that. And then they compare the outcome of the group with the new pill or drug with the placebo group, and sometimes you will find that the people in the placebo group achieve similar results, similar successful results, like the people in the group with the new pill or new drug, which shows that what we believe can affect us hugely in a physical way as well. And it demonstrates the mind's impact on the physical processes like stress hormone regulation as well. Have you ever heard of brain-mind duality in decision making? That is when we use both the logical, the analytical brain and the mind as the intuition to reach decisions. That can sometimes be interesting if brain and mind are not in harmony and there are the internal fights going on. If the logic says, yeah, it's good, it's great, but your intuition says, no, don't do it. Yeah, well, it might shout danger anyway, because that's what the brain does if it's about something new. And it's a fine line of listening and weighing up in a situation like that when there is in a conflict what could go wrong, and if it is a good thing to do, to decide for something or against something. It can cause some internal discussions. Going back to the stress regulation influence of the mind on our physical brain and body, let's have a look at mindfulness. There is so much more research coming out how mindfulness is positive for stress management, and it's not simply just meditation. There's a lot more to mindfulness, and I hope to find a guest. I've got someone in mind for a future episode to have a good discussion about mindfulness. Because mindfulness is a whole different way of living being present in the moment. And also when you eat, being present when you eat, you chew your food, you taste the different flavors. When you drink, you taste the different, when you have a coffee, for example, you can taste the coffee. Maybe if you drink it with milk, you can taste the milk. You're aware of all that. When you are with people, that's one thing that's actually getting neglected a lot. When you're with people, you be present with the person so that you can tune in properly. Switch off your phone. Don't pay attention to your phone. Put it on silent, put it on vibrate so that you don't miss anything out when you are with a person. Or when you go to a concert nowadays, you can see everybody's holding their phones up and taking videos or pictures. But then how do they experience the concert? Do they really tune into the vibe? Do they tune into the energy of the event? Or is it just later on when they're looking at it, but they don't have the same feeling about it, the same experience? It doesn't feel the same. So mindfulness is not just meditations. There is so much more. If you go out in nature, you can feel the ground under your feet if it's like normal pavement, or if it's gravel, if it's grass. You take in the smells of, well, now we're getting into winter, don't we? Autumn smells different than spring or winter or summer. And it's getting cold. You feel the temperature. You feel the wind, the breeze. You take in the sunlight, if you get any, if it's not raining or dull all the time. You see the fog. Autumn has a lot of fog. Fog and mist. It can offer a really interesting atmospheric feel outside. You hear the birds in the trees, all the different sounds of the different birds. If it's like different times of year, the colors on the trees are different. Like some trees have leaves coming up in the spring. And then in the autumn they turn the color because they fall off the trees as part of their cycle. Or in the winter you get the snow. And when the snow comes, and you can hear in the morning when you wake up and you can't hear the usual traffic on the roads, you can just guess that there might be snow, because the snow, fog actually does it as well. It kind of reduces the sounds. It muffles the sounds in a way. So all that's kind of part of mindfulness and being aware of what is happening around you, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste. And mindfulness can have a really nice calming effect on your inner being, on your inner well-being as well. So if you have clutter in your mind, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling there's too much going on and you're feeling stressed, breathing is great. Being mindful is great. It helps calming down the mind. And another thing that could be useful as well is journaling. Sometimes when you're reflecting on stuff, if you want to get some stuff out the subconscious and you're exploring who you are, and if you're pondering about questions, get out a journal and write things down. It really helps to declutter your mind. And this brings us to the end of the episode about brain and mind, or brain versus mind, of exploring brain and mind. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you did, I would be extremely happy and grateful if you subscribe and follow Exploring Brain and Mind on Apple, Spotify, all the other podcast outlets, and tune in again to the next episode.